Hello, and welcome to the Beyond Baba Yaga podcast, where I will attempt to reimagine the crone archetype to take the fear out of living child-free. I'm Josie, and today I'm joined by Fenella. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I found you because I read a really fascinating article that you wrote for Hello magazine online. How did that come about?
I'm part of a PR mastermind group, and we have the opportunity to meet journalists and pitch to them. And in one conversation that I had with one of the journalists from Hello magazine, she was talking about the fact that I didn't have children and that it was a topic of conversation in the office, and that there were lots of women who were kind of feeling the pressure about having children. And I explained to her the reason why I decided not to have children. And she said yes, to pitch for an article, and it went into Hello magazine.
Brilliant. It was so enjoyable and refreshing to read, and there were so many different bits in it that resonated for me. So I'd like to talk with you about a couple of those. You mentioned in it that you grew up in the 70s and there were things going on in the world that were influential in encouraging you not to have children. Can you remember what was going on around that time that was really making you think, no, having kids isn't for me?
Well, I grew up in the time of IRA and the Troubles, as they were called. My dad used to work for Ulster Television, and I would get really scared when he had to occasionally go over to Belfast, because obviously I thought it was a total war zone.
Yeah.
And then also there was the whole Cold War thing. And, you know, the adverts that were put on TV when we were little, they would really freak people out nowadays, because it was all about, if a nuclear bomb goes off, this is what you have to do.
Oh, really?
Oh, it was all prepping.
Just mainstream advertising.
On mainstream TV, telling you what you had to do, get underneath the table and etc., etc.
Wow.
Then there was the whole Greenham Common, the anti-war, the CND movement.
Yeah.
You know, it was really, really quite a strong fear of World War III. And so as a young person, I was think, well, you know, what sort of world is this to bring a child up in? And so apart from getting quite political when I was, I think, in my early teens, in terms of changing the world, really.
Yeah.
I was kind of like on another mission, you know. If I had children, actually, it didn't even figure in my thinking when I was a teenager until I was a late teenager. I think I made that decision.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have children. I want to be doing other things with my life. I want to make a difference. I want to make change.
Just thinking about the news and almost like the imminent threat of war going global, which seems like it's always, you know, potentially on the cards, and a lot of unrest and a lot of very hard-line political figures. It seems like the things that you felt as a young teenager are actually still really relevant now. They've changed and, you know, reshaped. We haven't necessarily got the Troubles in Ireland in the same way. But do you feel like there's still some of that kind of energy around?
Yes, there is. So whereas I think the difference being is in the 70s, as children, we had a lot more freedom. We took risks. We were out on the streets. We went out in the morning, came back in the evening. So that kind of made us quite resilient. And we, most of the time, put it to the back of our minds.
Yeah.
You'd have a bomb scare and you just took it. This was the way you lived. This was the world as it was.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I think that there is a higher level of anxiety amongst parents, amongst young people, and then that's all reflected. It's like this energy that runs through society, because it's catching. Energy is feelings are catching, as we know when you walk into a room. So there is a difference and there's similarity. And for me, because I've been observing what's been going on for the past however many years, I do believe that there is an agenda behind this to deliberately have people live in fear, which is why I do what I do in terms of my work, because I think we're being played in many ways, and what we have to do as human beings is to make sure that we don't drop into that division. We don't buy the fear, that we realise that together as individuals in community, we can really build something very positive.
I completely agree. I think that there is a feeling of fear. Like you say, energetically, it's almost like an atmosphere that is reinforced through so many different mediums that people of all ages now are kind of indoctrinated into a state of low-level anxiety just in the way that they live.
Yeah.
I wonder how much that feeds into the kind of norm of everyone blinkers on, get married, have children, settle down, focus on career, family, what is kind of expected, how much people buy into that because it seems safer when there's already a lot of fear going around than to go off and do something completely different.
That's an interesting perspective. And yes, having been on the planet for quite a long time, observing how the norms are perpetuated, how the norms continue, that, you know, that idea of having still the white wedding, the meringue for a lot of people, young girls, you know, with the whole princess thing.
Completely.
That was a really strong that came out of the 80s.
Yeah.
In the 70s, we had none of that. You
Oh,
know,
really?
wearing the pink, we didn't have that.
I always think that Disney is in some way responsible for a lot of that as well, like reinforcing that princess dream.
Yeah.
Figures and concepts can just become embedded in a whole generation of young women. And you alluded to it a little bit already, that you were in your late teenage years when you felt like you knew that you didn't want to have children. And part of that decision-making process was what you're experiencing in the world and wanting to make a positive change instead. What did that look like when you were a teenager?
When I was a teenager, I got into animal rights when I was probably about 14, 15, 16. I then said I wanted to become a vegetarian because I didn't like factory farming, which my mum resisted. And then I pushed it, and then I had to do my own cooking from quite a young age. And so I had a group of friends. We were very active. We used to go and do sit-ins, demonstrations, and we were the Ashtead animal activists. And then from there, I went to art college. And when I came to Bristol, that's where I did fine art. I was making social political comment.
Right.
So my degree show, I called it Life in Prison. So it was about how we were being observed, we were being conditioned, how nothing was as it seemed, and we were in a prison within a prison. And so it was quite dark.
Yeah.
And I was looking to make some money to go travelling. And I started working in an after-school club. And that began my love of working with children, because of their energy, their creativity, their imagination, and that, you know, they challenged you with their thinking, and they were naughty and mischievous, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. They were rule breakers.
So let's talk a little bit about what your child-free life is like now. What do you feel are the biggest benefits for you?
So I do have freedom. I have freedom to move around and go where I want to go. I've been able to start a business at the age of, and I know lots of other women do start it in their 50s, but I've had a journey of being able to explore, travel, and that's given me a huge opportunity to learn, really, because I've had that space to be able to learn and to follow my own interests in my own way for my own ends. Yeah. I have a real sense of independence. I have amazing friends. And I don't feel lonely, and I don't feel I'm going to be lonely when I'm older. I make my future, essentially.
Do you feel like you're missing out on anything that your friends who had children have?
Personally, no. No. I think I was never maternal. It's never, I think twice in my life I've thought, oh, is this something that I maybe have missed out on? And that thought went out of my head very, very quickly. Yeah. Because I do a lot of self-reflection, questioning at times. Yes. Not at all. Not at all.
In fact, your answer there just made me think of something. Do you think the choice not to have children allows the opportunity and the space to potentially have a better relationship with oneself? I know it's maybe a bit of a loaded question, but I'm kind of thinking, I know my friends who have had children, it seems like they are on a certain path in their life, then they have children, and then the entire focus really 9 times out of 10 is on the children in every way, and their relationship with the children and the fulfillment and nurturing of that child. And I wonder if sort of inevitably as a result of that, it's sort of impossible to give the same time and space to then nurturing, developing, flourishing as an individual.
I would totally agree with that, because I have lots of friends who have children, and I work with women who have had children, and it's that not knowing who they are, that sense of loss of identity, because, rightly so, the focus is on the children, because they're nurturing children, and children need support and guidance, and often there's just no space, no time, no energy to work on self. And then if they have to work as well in a job that they don't really like just to make the money, then there's all of those layers too, because a lot of energy is required to do those two things. I think women often need to be reminded of doing that, because the mindset, it becomes a pattern, and there's no judgment in that whatsoever. It just becomes something that they do. And they lose themselves, and then sometimes they get to a point where going, oh, where am I? I'm really worn out. Who am I? I need something for myself. They often say, I come last. And at the end of the day, there's little energy left for a desire to explore any of that either. It's just I need to actually physically rest. So it is finding a balance.
In the article that you wrote for Hello Magazine, you mentioned some of the comments that you'd received from well-meaning loved ones in your 30s. Things like, don't you think it's time you settled down? And you don't want to leave it too late, etc., which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. I know that I certainly can. What do you think that comments like that are all about? Why do people care when or if we choose to settle down or not? Because it really puzzles me.
I think it's about that. You've got to follow that conventional path. That's the way you do things in life. And most people do follow this set of guidelines and rules. And also, people like to judge other people without even thinking about it. And have ideas about what's right and what's wrong. Most ridiculous comment I ever got was, that's really selfish. And I went, well, so be it.
When you think about it in the cold light of day, there are no reasons to have a child that aren't selfish. When a person chooses to have a child, it is an entirely selfish decision. It's all motivated by stuff to do with self and the extended family and potentially fitting in society. So to have that reflected back as a description for choosing not to have a child just seems completely bonkers. How did you react?
Well, I'd react with a reframe or a throwback comment, because I think the intention behind that comment was, I'm selfish because I needed to give my mum grandchildren. And I said, well, I've got 2 brothers. They can give my mum grandchildren.
Completely.
I don't need to. And as I would have said the same thing is I'm making a decision not to bring another human being into the world. There are plenty of children without parents themselves. If I do want to have a child, I can foster, I can adopt. There are other options. So that choice was, I don't need to bring another human being into the world that is my blood, because that's, again, another thing that's never been important to me, the blood connection.
I agree.
It's family can be anybody. But it's that idea of having, I have something that is mine as well. And that was something that I observed with some of the mums that I worked with when I was working in the playground. It's about, this is my baby, it's of my body. And the idea as well that I have a child who I can impart knowledge to, I can teach and that's, with the best of intentions, that adults want to do that, is to nurture and teach and pass on their knowledge.
Yeah.
And none of that ever bothered me.
Yeah.
None.
No, I get it. They want to specifically have something that is of them that can be grown into a finished masterpiece that they can say, perhaps, I created this. Yeah, well, you, like I, have historically worked a lot in play. How much did you struggle with that dual experience of enjoying play with kids, which you so obviously did and were good at it, whilst also feeling that being a parent wasn't in your stars?
Yeah, I didn't struggle at all. I thought it was an advantage because I did believe that if you were working with children and you had your own children, there's a double pressure there. You've got to look after your own children and give them your energy. And then you've got to, in work, give other children your energy too. And so I felt not having children was an advantage in that I could really focus on my job working with children and they would get the best of me all the time.
Yeah. And I think maybe the play side of being with children, which is the good stuff really, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That's the best fun. Mm-hmm. Working in a job like that, you almost had all the good bits of being a parent without any of the worser bits. You probably did experience some of the difficulties. Did it feel like being a parent at times?
Sometimes, yes, because it was the support that children required. Because I worked with children whose parents didn't care about them.
Yeah.
I worked with children whose were sometimes experiencing neglect.
Yeah.
There were lots of latchkey kids. They were ace. Single parents who had several children, so they were having to work and there was all of that pressure there. So there were lots of challenges with these young people that I did work with.
Yeah.
And it taught me a huge amount about understanding human development, influence of adults on children who were being bullied at school, especially with the advent of social media down the line. They couldn't get away from it.
Yeah.
I could chat to them about how they were being treated by the teachers at school, essentially. They didn't necessarily talk about their parents because children always, obviously, they've got to be safe.
Yeah.
And so they will always make exceptions for their parent.
Yes.
And I could see the effect of some of the home life on the children's behaviour. There was quite often, quite a lot of anger going on with the kids, and they would lash out. I mean, I physically had to remove children from the playground.
When I was considering the possibility of having children, and I created a sort of pros and cons list of reasons to or to not have children, one of the reasons on the not to that was quite strong for me was that I feel that the current education system, let's talk about the state education system because that's the one that is most accessible for people, does not do the best job of setting children up for adult life.
Totally. So I'm going to be a bit slightly measured about my thoughts on the education system, and this is not to do with teachers. I'm not going to slate teachers here at all because they work in very difficult circumstances.
Completely.
So what we have is a system that's become even more rigid and more narrow in how we can teach. There's less art, there's less playtime. Those sorts of subjects aren't seen as important, and there's a real focus on children starting to learn to read and write at an earlier age, when play is a precursor to being able to learn. Because of the movement in play, it develops a part of the brain, which is the hindbrain, which enables the child to be ready to learn more language. So the education system, by being so rigid in its getting children to meet these attainment levels and not focusing on the fact that that can be done in a much more creative way, which will inspire children to learn. And then, they've got the SATs, you've got all the teachers trying to get the children through a certain, grading system. They have less flexibility in the way that they can teach. The curriculum kept being changed as well. And so in the desire to come out with this specific grades, which don't really mean anything, it means you can follow a set of rules. We have people who come out the end who is, let's go and do these academic subjects as well, that are going to, because I'm going to come out with a big debt, so I need to do a subject that's going to give me a job at the end.
Yeah.
So there are lots of different reasons, and I do think, again, the education system is not fit for purpose, not for the 21st century, not for the speed of change. What children are learning now has absolutely no relevance for what's going to be happening in the future. The books are all so
outdated. Yeah.
And sitting at computers as well and doing a lot of it on computer. That's not good for them either.
Let's finish up, just to bring it back to the conversation that we were having at the start. If you were in front of a young woman in her 20s, feeling like she wanted to make a positive change in the world, feeling like she might have strong beliefs, values, views that she wanted to pursue, but also feeling the societal and social pressure to settle down and start a family, and the fear of not doing that, what would you say to her?
I think we'd have a conversation with her around what having a family means, what having a child will mean in terms of responsibility, time, etc., needs of the child, and really so she can make an informed decision. It is about really understanding that the responsibility of having children, women do change when they have a baby. There's a hormonal kick in there. So yes, it's really about think carefully. I think I would talk about all the options, really.
Fenella, thank you so much for coming in. It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you. And like I said, I could have just carried on and on and on. Hopefully see you again so we can continue the conversation.
So thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you to Sharon for recording and producing this. You've been listening to the Beyond Baba Yaga podcast.